Spike Comes Out by the Rated Ponystar and read by Goombasa. The sound of the train leaving the station rang in Twilight's ears before she took a deep breath and inhaled the fresh smell of Ponyville that she had missed for so long. While having a chance to be an envoy for the zebra clans to learn about their culture and history was an exciting adventure, she was more relieved to be back home than anything else. Twilight Sparkle was really thankful that she had Zecora as a friend to accompany her, not only as the perfect translator for a language she still had problems understanding, a challenge she swore to conquer next time, but also to help her deal with the harsh conditions in the jungles and deserts that made up the zebra lands. The entire landscape was like one big, everfree forest, only with a much hotter climate, rain that could not be seen for weeks until a monsoon came, and deadly predators, including some sapient plants, that could swallow a pony whole. She made a mental note to actually request a squad of guards to accompany her next time. Still, despite the danger, it was a great trip with so much to see and learn that it made the scholar in Twilight giggle like a school filly. Best of all, she had arrived 3 days earlier than the day she announced in her letter to her friends. Pinkie Pie was bound to have a surprise party the moment she heard, or already knew with that mysterious Pinkie sense, and alert the rest of their friends of her arrival. Of course, the first thing Twilight wanted to do was reintroduce herself to the modern way of life that she had to live without during her trip. Just the thought of refrigerated food, a warm shower, and a real bed not made out of straw was making her eager enough that she wanted to teleport just to get home quicker. Most importantly, though, no more mosquitoes. She swore if another one of those insects bit her in the flank one more time, she was going to find a spell to erase them from the face of the planet. "I see happiness lingers in your mind. 'Tis always coming home that is a joy most kind," said Zecora, walking towards Twilight with her own baggage. "Yes, it's really nice to be back in Ponyville," said Twilight, stretching her wings. She picked up her bags with her magic and asked, "Do you think you could come to my place for some tea? It's the least I can do for all your help." Zecora smiled, but shook her head. "Alas, this offer I cannot accept, you see. I wish to return to my home deep in Everfree. But perhaps another time, when I am settled in. I wish now to decorate my home with the gifts of my kin." "Yeah, but I don't think my gifts will suit my home very well," thought Twilight, sheepishly looking at the bag of presents the tribes had given her. While some were masks or statues, others were a bit more strange, like jars filled with the eyes and ears of predators that the hunters had killed, talismans that they said would keep danger away, or the beetle necklaces, with actual live beetles with a wire through them that the zebra said would grant her wisdom. The two travelers said their goodbyes before going their respective ways. Twilight was glad her house wasn't far from the station, as she couldn't wait to see the look on Spike's face when she got home. Although she would be lying if she didn't admit she was worried something happened while she was away. Despite having left him alone when he was a baby dragon, she never had been gone for as long as she had these past 3 weeks. It took a few convincing arguments from her little brother that he was 16 now and could take care of himself. A nostalgic smile creeped up on Twilight's face as she remembered just how grown up her once little dragon had become. He was now just as tall as the average stallion, and had quite a bit of muscle tone on him that managed to attract the few mares his age. Of course, Twilight knew that Spike was still head over heels for Rarity even after all these years. Her trip down memory lane ended quickly when Twilight noticed she was already home, and in record time, too. Opening the door, she placed her luggage nearby and was relieved to see that the house was spotless. At least Spike didn't throw a party in here. Not like that one time Applebloom tried throwing one when the rest of her family went out of town for a whole day. That was a night even Discord said had too much chaos. "Spike, I'm home early!" shouted Twilight, expecting a reply. But there wasn't any. Curious, she looked in the kitchen and other rooms on the first floor, but there was no sign of the teenage dragon. "Spike? He must be upstairs in his room. Probably sleeping again, as usual." Deciding it wouldn't hurt to check up on him, Twilight went up the stairs quietly, just in case he was taking a nap. When she reached the final step, she saw that his door was closed, and so she slowly opened it, only to freeze right in place when she looked inside Spike's room. Spike wasn't alone. He was on his bed, with a stallion that she quickly recognized as Thunderlane's younger brother Rumble. And they were kissing. Not just a peck on the cheek. This was full-blown, lip-to-lip kissing that she had seen her parents and her brother and sister-in-law do. Twilight didn't know how long she stood there as the blissfully unaware couple continued their make-out session. Twilight didn't even take a single breath of air. She was too stunned by the fact that Spike, who she had no hint of being gay, was making out with a boyfriend that she never knew existed. Eventually, Spike opened one of his eyes, and also froze after leaping back on the bed away from the stallion. Rumble was confused by the sudden end to their kiss, until he too saw Twilight and blushed, equally horrified that they had been caught. There was an awkward silence in the air until Twilight finally managed to find her voice. Spike? What's going on? I can... muttered Spike, looking away from Twilight. She stepped forward with worry when she noticed tears beginning to form in his eyes. I thought you weren't coming back for 3 more days. I found time to come back early, whispered Twilight, trying to force her brain to wake up and analyze the situation. She had come home and found out that Spike, who she had known for 16 years and cared for all the same, was making out with a stallion. She tried to think of some sign of this in her recent memories, anything to indicate that Spike was actually gay. All she could do was wonder if all those times of trying to impress Rarity were fake. Did he even have a crush on her to begin with? When did he start feeling that he was gay? Was this just a phase or the real thing? Too many questions, thought Twilight, as she realized there was one thing she had to do. Talk with Spike. Alone. Rumble, right? Said Twilight, getting his attention as she gave him a nervous smile. I'm sorry, but I need to talk with Spike alone. Rumble looked at Twilight, then at the still shaken Spike, before standing up tall with a determined look on his face. Twilight was surprised by the challenging look he was giving her, as if he were daring her to do something bad to him. No, anything you can say to him, you can say to both of us. Rumble. Spike reached out and grabbed his hoof, making him look him in the eyes. Giving him a gentle smile, Spike whispered, It's okay. I need to do this. It was bound to get out anyway. But I'll be fine. Trust me. Biting his lip, Rumble looked at both Spike and Twilight before he sighed and nodded. He leaned down and kissed Spike on the lips with a quick peck. No matter what happens, I'll come back tomorrow. If you need me, come straight to me, okay? I love you. I love you too, said Spike, squeezing the hoof for a second before letting go. Rumble made his way to the door. Before he left, he looked at Twilight with a glare. If you hurt him... Staring at him in shock before he left without another word, Twilight couldn't help but wonder why in Equestria Rumble would think she was going to hurt Spike. All I want is to talk with him. She wished she had had time to prepare for this, but she was going to have to improvise. She thought about all the awkward moments she had to have with Spike in the past. From training him to use a toilet to teaching him the birds and the bees, it all seemed like picking flowers compared to what they were going to talk about now. How do you even prepare for something like this? Deciding it was pointless to delay this any further than it already had been, Twilight walked over to the bed and plopped down right next to Spike, who still refused to look at her. He did flinch when she wrapped a wing around him and whispered, How long? How long have I been with Rumble, or how long have I been gay? Both, I guess, but we can start with the latter. Honestly, I've only come to realize it in the past 3 years, answered Spike, shoulders sagging. But what about your crush on Rarity? Asked Twilight, pointing it out. Has that always been fake? Not entirely. Spike shook his head and covered his face. It's difficult to explain, all right? Remember how I always tried to be as tough as the guards back at the castle? Before we moved to Ponyville? I always looked up to them, acted like them, wanted to hang out with them because they were so cool. Like they were everything you wanted to be as a real man. He then looked Twilight in the eyes, a small, sad smile accompanying him. "But the one thing that they always had that I didn't were mare friends, or at least girls who were attracted to them. They looked so happy having such pretty ladies after them that I decided I wanted one too, to feel just as happy. I just needed to find the most beautiful of them all." "So when you met Rarity," said Twilight, "I picked her because any pony, straight or not, can see how amazing she looks. I thought I had struck gold, and so I decided to woo her and make her my mare friend. Granted, it made me look more like a love-struck puppy, the way I was acting." Spike rubbed the back of his neck, blushing. Twilight couldn't help but giggle. His actions all those years ago were really quite cute. Spike then sighed again. "But over time, I didn't feel anything from this crush of mine, so I tried harder and harder, but nothing happened until—" He brought his knees up and hugged himself. "Until the Equestria Games 3 years ago." Twilight remembered that year. The games were held in Van Hoover. She and her friends all went to see them together. Now that she thought about it, she did recall Spike being a bit quiet during those games, as well as less interactive with the group. "I saw this runner, an earth pony from Trottingham named Quick Trick, and when I did, I was mesmerized," whispered Spike, sighing like he had seen something out of a dream. "I didn't know why I was staring at first. All I could think about was how handsome he was. I started to feel things that I hadn't felt before, like my body was on fire on the inside, but the burning was pleasurable. Watching him sweat as he ran made me sweat too, and when he won that gold medal, I think I was cheering louder than any pony else in the stadium." Twilight just sat there, focusing on Spike's story and reading his body language. It was clear that this was his first real attraction, and even now, despite having a cult friend, he was still attached to this famous athlete. Twilight was comforted by the fact that this behavior was no different from a normal teenager's. Then she felt momentarily horrified when she realized how much that comforting thought meant. Did I just think that Spike was not normal? No, not like that. At least, not in an insulting way. I didn't just think that, right? She pushed her thoughts aside and returned her attention to Spike. His blush grew redder and redder as he continued talking. "I couldn't stop thinking about him. Even when we came home, he was in my dreams both day and night until one day I woke up, and at first I thought I wet the bed, but it wasn't pee, it was something else." Twilight was now blushing as well by this point. A part of her wished she didn't have to hear about her little brother's first wet dream, but she had to remember that such things were part of a healthy sexual attraction towards the gender you were into. "When I realized it had done, you couldn't imagine what I felt. Shock, anger, confusion," muttered Spike, lowering his head. "I cried a lot, trying to deny it. Even tried harder at wooing Rarity, like if I could get her to love me, it could all go away. But no matter how many times I tried, I couldn't stop looking at stallions. I couldn't stop thinking about me kissing or hugging them. I couldn't help it, Twilight. I like guys. I'm gay!" He was now sobbing, like it was both a relief and a burden to speak about everything out loud. Twilight was prepared for this, and quickly embraced the crying dragon, letting him sink his face into her chest to cry on. He sobbed there for a long time, dampening her coat as she said nothing, just letting him cry it all out while stroking his scaly back to soothe him. Slowly, Spike's crying came to a halt as he wiped his tears with a claw before taking a few deep breaths. I'm sorry if you're angry at me." "Spike, why would I be angry at you?" asked Twilight, pressing a hoof against his cheek. "I admit I am a bit hurt that you couldn't trust me with this." She bit her lip when she noticed him lowering his gaze as if he were getting scolded. She lifted his chin up and smiled. "But that doesn't mean that I hate you." "Really? You don't think I'm disgusting or want to throw me out?" asked Spike, his voice trembling. Twilight shook her head. Why would you ever think that? Because you're gay? Spike, you're still the same baby dragon I raised ever since I was a filly. You're still the little brother I love. Nothing's changed, Spike. She smiled and booped him on the nose. Maybe a few things will be different because you like the same sex, but it doesn't mean I'll love you any less than I always have. Nothing ever will, Spike. We're family, and we always stick together. At long last, a true smile appeared on Spike's face as a few more tears dripped down his cheeks. Sniffling, he said, You really mean it? You don't hate me? Twilight kissed him on the forehead and wrapped her forelegs around him in a bone-crushing hug. Never, you lovable dragon, you. She could feel Spike finally relax in her embrace, like a weight had been lifted from him, and he could breathe once again. Twilight could also feel her own worries fade away as well. She had been nervous about how this was going to change both her and Spike. But now that she had heard him, looked at him, comforted him, she realized that nothing truly had changed. Straight or gay, he was still Spike. He was still her #1 assistant. He was still her little brother. Why did you even think I would hate you, Spike? Asked Twilight, who couldn't help but bite her lip as she thought. She would have thought Spike would have known better than to doubt her love for him. Just like the time he ran away from home and all the other adventures they had been through together. Was he really that worried? Spike lowered his head again and muttered, Because not every pony is like you, Twilight. There are ponies out there that look at individuals like me and see us as nothing more than abominations. Rumble, Spike hesitated to speak, but Twilight put a hoof on his knee and motioned for him to continue. Even if it was bad news, she wanted to know more about the young stallion that had stolen Spike's heart. Rumble he had to deal with such hatred from his own parents. He rubbed his shoulder, while Twilight's mouth dropped in shock. When he told his parents, they flipped. Kicked him out and disowned him like he wasn't their son anymore. Thunderlane was furious, and they all argued. His mom... Spike shook his head while clenching his fist, fire breathing out of his nose. His mom told him she wasn't going to have a fag for a son, so she gave him a choice. Either attend this camp that would cure him, or get out and never come back. Twilight's hooves covered her mouth upon hearing this. She couldn't believe it. But upon hearing this, she understood why Rumble was glaring at her when he left. He was worried she would do the same to Spike that his mother did to him. What kind of camps are these? Asked Twilight, although she was hesitant to learn something new for once. A stiff laugh escaped from Spike's lips before he answered in a somber tone. From what Rumble has told me, and from what I learned on my own, they're camps parents send their children in order to cure the gay, but really all they want is an excuse not to deal with the revelation that they're not getting grandfoals. Or maybe they actually believe in that stuff, I don't know. Spike sighed before covering his face with his claw. They force teens and kids to accept that they have a disease, and that they have to purge it from their minds so that they can be cured. They hurt them, Twilight. They beat them, spray them with water, lock them up in confinement with little to no food, force them to read anti-gay propaganda. And when they come out, most are too scared to be gay, or they end up self-destructing. Twilight felt the room get colder with each revelation that came out of Spike's mouth. She had heard of some ponies not taking kindly to those who were gay, but she never paid attention to it since, until now, it didn't seem so important to her. But with Spike now admitting he was gay, she growled and quickly hugged him, like a mother bear protecting her cub. I promise you right now, Spike, if any pony tries to do that with you, for whatever reason, I will do everything in my power to protect you and make them pay. I'll scorch all of Equestria if I have to. She made a mental note to take a closer look at the social and political situations for homosexuals by the end of the day, with the particular note to ask Princess Celestia to send all the information that she could. If such a thing were happening in Equestria, even by just a small margin, then the elements themselves should be going to make sure it stopped dead in its tracks. She never liked getting into politics, even when she became a princess, but if it meant making the world safer for Spike, then she was willing to get involved. "How do you know so much about this?" asked Twilight. "Rumble told me about it. He and his brother are part of a group that helps homosexuals everywhere by raising awareness of the mistreatment we get," answered Spike with a proud smile on his face. "Despite what happened to him, he and his brother want to make sure that others don't suffer for being who they are." "Thunderlane sounds like a good brother," said Twilight with a smile, happy that Rumble had at least one member of his family that loved him. "Yeah, Thunderlane lost it with his parents the day they left. Said that if their parents were going to be that way, then they were going to lose 2 sons. They left Cloudsdale for good and settled here in Ponyville." "How could they disown him over something like this? They don't deserve to be parents," muttered Twilight, her wings flaring out in anger. Her tone switched from disgust to sympathy as she noticed the worried look on Spike's face. "You really care about him, don't you?" Spike, blushing, smiled and nodded as he looked up and seemed to be in thought of the one who had stolen his heart. Twilight could see something very familiar in Spike's eyes, a glittering spark that she had seen time and time again with Cadence and Shining Armor whenever they were around. It was the spark of love. "Yeah, I do," answered Spike. "He helped me come to terms with the fact that I was gay. Caught me staring at him and, well, one thing led to another. He's never rushed us in our relationship and always takes care of me. We've only been together for a year, but he's been the best thing to ever happen to me." "He sounds like a good pony," commented Twilight, making a mental note to invite Rumble to dinner sometime soon in order to get to know him personally. "And let him know that, even if he is a stallion, if he hurts Spike, I'll show him what it means to anger an alicorn, sympathetic past or not." A sudden thought came to her that made her gulp. "Spike, have you done it with him yet?" "What? Twilight?" shouted Spike, shaking his head. "No offense, but not talking about that with you." "Sorry, won't mention it again. I just thought I should know, you know," replied Twilight sheepishly. Spike rubbed his temples. "Right, can we just forget this part of the conversation?" Twilight giggled before she asked one final question that lingered in the back of her mind. "Do you plan on letting every pony else know? Like our friends?" Once again, Spike was quiet as he stared at the floor, deep in thought about the question Twilight had given him. After a few minutes, he closed his eyes and answered, I want to, but not yet. I just told you, and I'm glad you took it well, but I want to wait a bit longer before we tell the rest of the gang, and only if Rumble agrees to it." Nodding, Twilight wrapped a wing around Spike and nuzzled him. "Of course. Whatever you two decide on, I'll support you all the way." "Twilight, thank you," whispered Spike, smiling as wide as he could. "I was afraid the worst would happen if you found out, but I'm glad it didn't. I'm sorry I didn't trust you." "It's okay, Spike. I know this couldn't have been easy for you." Twilight got off the bed and smiled at him. "Why don't you go find Rumble and let him know he doesn't have to worry anymore? I'll go and pick up a pizza and the two of us can spoil ourselves while I tell you about my trip." "Can I have some gems with it?" asked Spike, his tongue sticking out with drool on the edge. "Of course." "Oh, boy! You got it. Extra cheese on my half," shouted Spike as he rushed from the room. The sound of the front door slamming echoed across the halls. Twilight smiled and shook her head, pleased that everything had worked out. She had learned a few new things about Spike, but in the end it didn't matter. They were still a family. Nothing had changed. The end.